Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. I am in the middle of catching up on a spate of reviews that I wrote a while ago and posted on Goodreads and have never actually turned on my camera to talk about on my YouTube channel. So I'm still catching up with these. Thanks for your patience if these are not your favorite kind of videos, and if they are, well, I hope you enjoy this one. I want to talk to you about a book I read last month in January of 2025 with a friend of mine from a Discord that I belong to. And the book is by Byung-Chul, and it is called Vita Contemplativa. Byung-Chul has been on my radar for a number of years. He's a South Korean-born philosopher and cultural theorist who now lives in Germany and writes in German. And he's put out a spate of very short books. I don't think I showed you the spine there. And they all address topics of really sort of looming cultural concern. Big cultural concern, like exploitation under a capitalist system that conditions everyone to be on all the time, our increasingly attenuated sense of self under a regime of digitalization, and the degrading effects of living in a society that constantly measures a person's worth and a person's value strictly by achievement and performance metrics. Vita Contemplativa came out in 2024, was published by Polity Books, and it's about a cluster of similar issues, namely our inability to appreciate the human or the humane pursuit of leisure. Despite the name of the book, it has nothing to do with the term Vita Contemplativa in the way you might be already familiar with it, which is a distinction, the Vita Contemplativa versus Vita Activa distinction that was one thrown around in philosophy going back at least to Aristotle and maybe further, about whether you should live a life of quiet inward reflection, the Vita Contemplativa, or one in which you enter the public life, almost always the political life, even if that doesn't mean the sphere of politics strictly speaking, but you interact with other people as opposed to spend your life reading about books, or reading books and thinking about them, basically. Instead of that distinction, which this book is not about, Han addresses a question that is more incumbent on us as citizens of a digital age who require constant dopamine hits, as it seems that we do. In a world where nearly all of our actions are goal-driven and purposeful and caught up in a fitful logic of self-perpetuation, have we lost touch with a vital sense of what makes us human? Which, he claims, is the undirected purposelessness of leisure. And for Han, the answer is a definitive yes, we have. To quote him, because we look at life exclusively from the perspective of work and performance, we view inactivity as a deficiency that must be overcome as quickly as possible. There's something about this argument that seems intuitively attractive. The problem is that Han takes it, runs with it, and then refuses to cede an inch of ground, going so far as to suggest more than once during a short book that anything remotely work-related is alienating or dehumanizing, and that everything that's human belongs to the realm of leisure. Surely the goal is to achieve some sort of harmony between work and leisure, right? Not to eschew work altogether. Work should not be our sole source of human joy, but someone would be hard-pressed, I think, to suggest that work is and can be nothing but soulless drudgery. In addition to taking his argument too far, Hahn, or his translator, who is Daniel Stoyer, uses language in sometimes what is a sloppy and non-rigorous way, which is always a problem in philosophy. Throughout the book, leisure is essentially used as a stand-in for non-directed action, and then culture, and then in the last part, he uses leisure as a stand-in for religion. Of course, the connection to culture is the most convincing, I think. Hahn says that history is what happens when action with a goal in mind takes place, while culture is what happens when goalless action occurs. There's not really anything there when you stop to think about it. I think it's sort of a facile distinction that doesn't hold. I think it's also just sort of an untenable position when you put it under a microscope. Surely some historical events take place purely as accident, just as some matters of cultural significance are planned and purposeful. Right? Am I wrong here? I don't know. Nevertheless, the distinction speaks to a truth to which we want to call attention. There is something deeply valuable in partaking of the ludic, the playful, the festive, the celebratory. Again, all words used as synonyms of leisurely, but that have slightly different English language connotations. Hahn approaches a really interesting body of questions, but for me, the best parts of the book are where he appropriates the language of previous thinkers, almost always philosophers. For example, Nietzsche, Hannah Arendt, and Heidegger, and Walter Benjamin too, in order to make his arguments. Aside from framing his critiques around the neoliberal subject who is constantly shaped by the need for, as I've said, goal-directed action, much of what Hahn says isn't really new. Hannah Arendt thinks that our humanity can be found by sort of heroically entering the political sphere and fulfilling our role as the Aristotelian political animal that we were always meant to be, the zoon politikon. This is clearly a goal that Hahn will reject on its face. On the other hand, Hahn adopts Heidegger's criticism of philosophy shifting from one of being to one of doing, but you don't need to read Hahn to realize this. Heidegger himself spent his entire life, which was a long life, trying to describe how this trend from the shifting away from being, a shifting away from a philosophy of ontology, has been playing out in the 25 centuries since the pre-Socratics. Hahn doesn't make the book one sustained argument in conversation with one thinker or from one point of view, and I think this is another pitfall of the book. Instead, each chapter takes up the main idea from a slightly different viewpoint, creating a sort of theme with variations. Some of the variations are downright perplexing. In the last chapter, as I mentioned before, he suggests that religion, by which he means something like the reverence that the Romantics had for nature in the early part of the 19th century, that religion is one of the ultimate embodiments of inactivity. He also suggests a politics of being, and that a politics of being is the only effective way that we'll be able to fight the current climate crisis. That one was really, really weird for me to read, because I don't even know what it would look like for a set of policy initiatives to be the result of anything other than goal-directed, purposeful action. In late capitalism, where nothing can escape the Scylla and Charybdis of commodification and alienation, Hahn's thesis is an enticing one. but he fails to convince his audience, or at least fails to convince me, uh, and doesn't really stretch the argument as far as he would ideally like to. Like I said, it's a very short book. It's about 100 pages. It's very short. I think it's far too short to harness the kind of arguments that would be needed to convince us that all work is dehumanizing and that all culture or ceremony or play is human. Han's style is, again, for me, it's a little too episodic. It's a little too wandering. If you like the work of Nietzsche, who clearly influences him in many ways, you might be more attracted to Han's sort of philosophical, rhetorical approach. Early on in the book, Han juxtaposes the flaneur's effortless wandering to the purposeful, determined walk of someone who must be going somewhere and be there at a certain time. Han's argument is one that requires determination and purpose, ironically. But in fitting with the content of his message, Han proves to be the flaneur himself, drawn to the aphoristic, the epigrammatic, the apothematic, instead of being our new Immanuel Kant, the philosopher whose stroll around Königsberg everyone could set their watches by. I guess we can't fault him for his consistency, but there's some interesting ideas here, even if they're not completely new. A lot of the ideas have been reappropriated from areas that aren't quite philosophy. Like, for example, how long have we been talking about the problem of digitization and online life killing our attention span, taking away time from family, friends, ceremony, community, and stuff like that? That's a conversation that's at least 30 years old, maybe older. But like I said, he appropriates it to the field of philosophy. And I just wish the book would have been tighter, which is weird to say of such a short book already, but more focused in the number of ways that it tries to approach this issue. Because he really gets into some detailed arguments and starts to make good points. And as soon as he starts to make good points, he drops it and starts a new chapter and looks at it from another angle. And that was really frustrating. But I will say the read that we had in the discussion in the Discord was really, really interesting. We sort of went chapter by chapter and really sussed out the ideas. And by the way, I want to thank Brendan, who sent me this book as sort of a Christmas care package, along with some noodles that were absolutely amazing. Still working my way through those. But those are my thoughts on Byung-Chul Han's Vita Contemplativa. Interested to read other things. I've heard about the Burnout Society and several other books. If you have any thoughts about Byung-Chul Han, please leave them below. Recommend any other books that might be stronger, better, more interesting. I don't think interesting was really the problem here. It was the sort of wanted something longer or a more sustained argument from a particular perspective. But let me know. Leave me a comment. And until then, I'll talk to you later. Bye.